Welcome back to the Football Italia live show. I'm back, holiday's over, and so we gotta start talking a little bit about Serie A, about the latest transfers, because finally we got a few transfers, a few things are moving now in Serie A, and I'm Lorenzo Vettori, joined today by Peter Young, writer of Football Italia, and Matt Santangelo of this Milan podcast, and many more things related to Italian football. Thank you both for joining me today, guys.
Absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.
So good to see a Milan thing behind you, Matt, because one of the biggest news of the day is Diego Moreira arriving in Milan to undergo his medical test with Milan, sign his contract with Milan. It becomes the third summer signing for the Rossoneri, a big one, because it's 50 million. I followed Fabrizio Romano earlier this morning saying that the fee can go with bonuses even up to 65 million. 50 million is the starting fee, and it can go up to 65. There's a huge sell-on clause for Strasbourg, which is the club that is sending Moreira to Milan. What's your take on this signing? Are you excited? What do you think Milan should expect from this guy?
I'm very excited. I think, let me just start by saying I don't claim to be an expert on Diego Moreira. I have heard his name get floated around with Milan and linked to other clubs around Europe, for quite a while now. And obviously, when you see the quoted figure, you think, all right, Milan, no, there's no chance. Serie A clubs, they're not going to touch this guy. They just don't have the capacity to do so. And then I saw the news come out yesterday from multiple sources, and it was very interesting because we've seen Milan this summer show that intent, that they're willing to raise the bar in the form of higher transfer fees, right? We saw it with Ramos out of nowhere. The fee kept climbing and everyone was like, 50, okay, that's a lot. 60, 70. And then you saw Mario Gila come in, shortly after. And then you see 50 and you're thinking, okay, Jerry Cardinale, the president of Milan, Ruben Amorim, they seem like they're turning a new leaf here because they don't spend these types of figures on players if they're not truly bought into the coach and the project going forward. And when I look at Diego as a player, I actually see a bit of a gadget player for Ruben Amorim to utilize. This is a system that's going to utilize, two attacking midfielders, two wingers, however you want to categorize them, but a lot of emphasis on wing backs. And this is a guy that can play on both sides of the pitch, which I think has tremendous appeal for someone like Amorim, who, can kind of mix him around throughout a given 90-minute match, right? You can do overloads on the right or on the left based on, the opposition. He's technical, he's strong. This isn't more of that Andrea Conti type wing back that Milan bought years ago for a pretty substantial fee. This is a player that feels premium from a Milan's point of view. And I look at the fee and I understand the initial knee-jerk reaction, like, whoa, this is a lot of money. But I think if you're a Milan fan, you've seen this team cut corners so much over the years and nickel and dime on players that they truly needed in the moment, and they were cheap. I can't, moan and complain from a Milan's fans' point of view, and from if I'm speaking purely in their position, for a fee like this for a player that did turn down reportedly clubs in Spain, England, and of course Germany and Italy.
Peter, we're talking about Club Milan that has invested, I think, around 150 million. Then it's going to be more with add-ons because we're talking about 70 million for Gonzalo Ramos, a further 30 million for Mario Gila. It's kind of surprising if you think about the Milan situation just a few months ago when they were reluctant to buy and to spend a lot of money on some targets for Massimiliano Allegri and the previous management. Where do you see Milan at this point? I mean, big investments, they've signed players in areas that they need. Do you think they need even more? I'm not talking about the title because the title is going to be pretty tough for everyone, I think, but at least for a spot in the top four.
Well, with the way they're spending the money, it seems like top four has to be the minimum objective for this season if you're a Milan fan. As you said, it's going to be an interesting one for the title. I've already got my own sort of predictions, which I'll keep to myself for now, for how the table might look in 9 months' time. Whether Milan might be at the top of it, we don't know. So I was reading an article from Fabio Capello a couple of days ago who described it as a work in progress, a bit of a construction site, and I think that's a pretty accurate description of the state of affairs at Milan at the moment. I think there's a lot of focus that needs to be done on the players that need to be moved on before we start looking at bringing in any more players. But it's interesting what Matt was saying about it being a sort of turning of a leaf for Milan. It's certainly a new era with this mass clear out that we had a couple of months ago with the manager, sporting director, technical director, CEO all leaving. As you said, Lorenzo, there was a bit of a reluctance to back previous managers or bring in the exact targets that certain managers wanted. And this feels like a completely different approach this summer. It's a Milan club that is not afraid to spend the money. We're seeing a completely different approach to what we've seen in previous years. We're seeing a completely different approach to how other clubs in Serie A are operating at the moment. Susie and I were having a conversation a couple of days ago about how you take Roma as an example. We've missed out on so many different targets this summer by playing that sort of lowball game of, okay, we'll go for a loan, we'll offer 20 million, 22 million, 25 million, 30 million, and then walking away from a deal. Whereas Milan seems to just put the money on the table at the moment and say, here's your 50 million, here's your 80 million, and get the deal over the line. And it does seem to be working for them. Whether the results come on the pitch is yet to be seen. But yeah, no, it's certainly an interesting summer. And yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes next.
You know, a strange thing about Milan, this is something that has been going on from the very beginning of the summer transfer window, even from the beginning of June. So end of the season, they sack everybody. They sack the directors, they sack the coach, and then it takes 3 weeks to get a new director, get a new coach, and all of a sudden they get Ruben Amorim. Then from one day to another, they got a deal done for Gonzalo Ramos. For Gila, it was kind of different because Gila has been like a potential deal for Gila was in the air for a few months, even because it was a target of Viglitari. But then again, after those two signings, July entirely quiet, like people complaining on social media, we're doing nothing, we just got two signings and then do nothing. And yesterday, out of nowhere, again, without previous reports, without previous rumors, bang, deal done. 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later, you got the player in Milan. You saw the video before of the player arriving this morning in Linate Airport for his medical test. So it's really been like that. You don't read many rumors about the targets that Milan want, but then all of a sudden they got the deal done. The only doubt I have about Moreira is, it can be a good thing as well, but I think the big challenge, this is something I wrote for Football Italia as well this morning, is you need to find the balance there, because you have a very attacking winger like Moreira on the left, Chukwueze or Salemaikers on the right. You need to buy probably an attacking midfielder, because unless you start Rabiot in there or Loftus-Cheek or unless Diego Moreira plays as an attacking winger, which I don't believe, an attacking midfielder, which I don't think, then now the ball is on Amorim's court, because he has to, find a right balance there, because we're talking about a very attacking-minded setup for Milan. So this is the only thing that leaves me with a little bit of doubts regarding the Milan strategy, because as things stand, I think they still need to buy an attacking midfielder and, of course, sell Rafael Leao, because regardless of Diego Moreira's signing, it's clear that Leao is no longer part of the plans. There were reports from yesterday that he's been offered to Roma as well, but apparently doesn't want to stay in Serie A anymore.
Can I just add a couple things too, real quick on that? It's interesting, right? Because we talked about the lump sum they've spent so far on 3 players. Right, the transfer strategy has sort of shifted, right? We've heard for years and we've seen for years Milan go with this 7 new players at 20 to 25 million, and they're going for like a numbers game, right? Like people were calling it Moneyball, right? Players that maybe are castaways at other clubs and bringing them in. You know, we saw it in the first summer with Ferlani and then the shift after Maldini, Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek, Reinders, all like 20 to 25. And it's amazing to see how Milan have spent 150 million plus on 3 players. And you just mentioned it, Lorenzo. There still feels like a lot of work to be done, which just goes to show you that this is something that takes a lot of time, but it is a construction site. It is a project that was so far removed from being where it needed to be post-Scudetto and semifinal run of the Champions League. So for all the good that Milan have done with spending the money and getting players that, for the most part, people are on board with, they still probably need a center back, right? And then that's someone that potentially could come in as well. We could be talking about a 200 plus million summer from Milan, which would be unprecedented for this ownership and, of course, this club. We haven't seen that since 2017 with the Chinese ownership.
We got to move quickly to other teams as well, because we got Juventus, who are on the verge of announcing Guglielmo Vicario as a new signing. I'm checking the mobile to see if there's an official announcement yet, but not yet. Yesterday, they announced Gianluca Mi. Again, in Turin, things are starting to shape up a little bit, because they got a new centre-back, they got a new goalkeeper. It's 6 signings if we include Vicario as well. There's a tricky thing that I read this morning on Twitter, which I like to mention, and it's funny to think about it, but I think it doesn't say the whole story about the Juventus transfer strategy, because the general feeling among the Juventus fans is that this is a good transfer window. What I read today on Twitter was Juventus needed a strong centre forward and a strong goalkeeper, and they got them from Tottenham, who were almost relegated last season. Now, it's true, because they were nearly relegated last season, but I think it's not just purely because of Kolo Muani and Vicario's performances. Peter, how do you see that? How do you see the whole Juventus strategy generally? And do you think it's mostly positive or negative?
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth there, that I don't think it's solely on Vicario and Kolo Muani for Tottenham finishing 17th in the Premier League last season. But overall, I would probably agree that it's been a largely positive transfer window for Juventus. I think, as you sort of hinted at there, they identified a few clear targets. They needed a strong centre forward. They know what they're getting with Kolo Muani. He's been there and done it. He's averaged a goal every other game in his short stint when he was in Serie A. 8 from 16, I think it was. So that should provide a certain level of guarantee. They needed a goalkeeper. That's been a bit of an up and down. I think that's probably one of the slightly more negative sides of the window, with how many targets they've gone through in goal, whether it's Alisson, Martinez, Suzuki, and now to finally land on Vicario. But that was an area where they had identified that they wanted to improve. And I think Vicario probably does offer a little bit more solidity than someone like Di Gregorio, who, it's become clear for quite a few months now that his time at Juventus is coming to an end. Alay Begovic, I think, is a really, really exciting signing. Probably one of the most exciting signings that we've seen so far in Serie A this summer. And Lukumi, I think, is a really, really good value for money signing at his age. Primed and ready to play in Serie A, has done it for the last few years. I think 20 million euros, I think that's a really, really good bit of business. One of the most underrated bits of business that Juventus has done, I think, so far.
Yeah, no,
I think so.
I'm sorry. No, you go.
Yeah, go on, Matt.
Yeah, no,
No. I was just about to ask you.
Okay, yeah. I think some of the signings they've made this summer have been kind of bordering between safe and I think solid. I don't think there's any signings they've made that I'm like, I don't really like that one. I mean, I think Celik in defense, they picked him up from Roma on a free transfer. There was, I guess, a little bit of a transfer saga there between Roma because they wanted to bring him back, and Juventus obviously snagged him there. I think he's a pretty sturdy defender, and I think Lukumi, we've seen him over the years in Serie A as well. He's pretty solid. I think he's going to raise the bar from what they had last year. And then Kolo Muani, this is a transfer saga that we've seen for a while now. They wanted him last year, couldn't get a deal done. He goes to Tottenham. Tottenham have a miserable season, and they finally get their guy. So I think across the board, I think if you're a Juventus fan looking at this market, you're saying we've checked off the boxes that we probably needed. Yes, the signings haven't been glamorous across the board. There's no, El Pepita level signings where you're like, whoa, like 60, 70 million, Juventus are making a statement here. But I think they're getting back to signings that I think are pretty low risk, and the floor is pretty high. So you're not going to be in a position where some of these, presumably based on what I'm seeing, are going to be duds, is how I see their market.
Well, the thing is, they've already had that summer. Sorry, Lorenzo. I was going to say with Juventus, they've had that summer a couple of years ago when they have gone and spent 50 million on Koopmeiners or Douglas Luiz, and it's not worked. So I think it needed, and we've also had Juventus transfer summers where they've hardly brought in anyone at all in recent years. So it's almost like a third different strategy for a third different summer. But I think it needed a slight change in approach. And I think you're right that we're at sort of solid level signings, a couple of guys who have that Serie A experience, and who are going to be able to help you out in those horrible away games on a Friday evening or whatever it might be. And yeah, I think it's been a pretty solid approach from Juventus so far. I also like Zeki Celik on a free transfer. I think that's a really good pickup.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's the team is still not complete. I'm showing you an article that we got this morning from various sources saying that if Juventus sell Jonathan David, then Joshua Zirkzee is the preferred target in attack now at Manchester United, ex-Bologna striker, ex-Bologna star. Fikayo Tomori, for example, who is no longer in Milan's plan, going to be replaced by Mario Hila, who we mentioned before, is a potential opportunity for Juventus, even though there's still no negotiation between Juventus and Milan. Frankesi as well, an ex-Milan player now available as a free agent, is a target in central midfield, but I think here Juventus will need to wait a little bit and see whether this player can lower his demands and ultimately return to Serie A, because he does want return to Serie A after playing with Milan and Atalanta. Peter, one question about Vicario, because Juventus fans are talking a lot. The goalkeeper issue has been very much alive for Juventus from last season. I think it's an upgrade on Di Gregorio. The Italy call-ups speak for themselves in recent years. I think Di Gregorio was only called up once after winning the best Serie A goalkeeper of the year. I might be wrong, but probably he was called up and never made his debut. Vicario has been Donnarumma's backup for a few years now. Last season, it was really tough for him, his worst season at Tottenham. But how do you explain that? What's the feeling that you have about Vicario at Juventus generally, and how would you explain his tough season at Tottenham last year?
Well, first, to go for the positives, I think it's telling that if you ask a lot of Tottenham supporters for their opinions on Vicario, it would probably be still relatively positive, despite the fact that they almost got relegated last season. There's a goalkeeper there who clearly has probably been wanting to move on from Tottenham for most parts of the last season, for various different reasons. But yeah, obviously it's been a very tricky season collectively for Tottenham last campaign. I think there were various issues with personnel, issues off the pitch, issues with the togetherness. And it was a sort of hangover from the season prior where they finished very low under Ange Postecoglou, but sort of made up for it by winning the Europa League. So that was a spiral that had been going on for maybe more like...
I think we've probably lost our friend Peter. Okay, there you are. I've lost you for a second there. We got it. We've lost Peter for a second. He's connecting. It will be back shortly. I want to show you, Matt, the list of the most expensive signings in Serie A so far, and the first one is somebody we've mentioned already, Gonzalo Ramos of AC Milan, signed by Milan for around 70 million, which is something we mentioned before. now transfer marketing here, they show the permanent transfers as well. So for example, in here we see Rasmus Højlund, who is actually a signing made last season, same as Lois Openda. So currently the top 3 signings in terms of transfer value in Serie A are Gonzalo Ramos, Randall Kolo Muani, and Santiago Castro. 3 strikers, 2 starters, Gonzalo Ramos and Kolo Muani. Castro is a backup at Roma. Would you see him? Roma, as you can see here, will welcome Rodrigo Mora as well today, because he's landing in Rome at 6:30 local time, as usual, medical tests, and then sign his contract with the Giallorossi. Meantime, we got Peter back. Welcome back, Peter. Connection issues there, happens.
Apologies. Yeah, I'm back. Should be fine.
No worries.
No problems.
No worries. Jim, I was showing to Matt and to our friends following us the list of the most expensive signings. Do you want to finish first on Vicario, and then we go on these most expensive signings so far?
Sure. Yeah, I was just saying that it's probably been a collective thing for Tottenham. You know, their sort of downfall over the last not just season but sort of 18 months, 2 years, which again I don't think you could pin solely on Vicario. But there's a player there who clearly has been wanting to move for quite a while. Somebody who's not played in Serie A for the last couple of years. I think a homecoming is probably the right move. It's probably the right time. It's probably the right time for Tottenham to move him on and sort of head in a different direction. I think it's right that they're having a bit of a mass clear out of the playing staff, coaching staff as well. So I think Vicario's actually probably handled himself quite well over the last sort of 6 months, because it's been difficult for him as well with injuries. He had a couple of injuries over the last 2 seasons. Actually, I think it's 3 different sort of significant spells he's had out. So, it's been a tough time for him. And I think coming home, I think being in Italy will help him. I think being at a big club like Juventus, where supporters will want him because he's such an upgrade on Di Gregorio, and he'll be welcomed there. I think it's a really good move.
So back with the most expensive signings now. We were talking about Gonzalo Ramos, Kolo Muani, Castro. Now Ramos and Kolo Muani will be starters. Castro, I would expect him to be a backup, just like Ale Begovic of Juventus, even though he can play maybe as an attacking midfielder, as a right winger as well. But the same I said about Milan earlier. I can repeat the same about Juventus. You need balance to play, for example, Ale Begovic, Conceição, Yildiz, and Kolo Muani all at the same time. I'm not sure this will be possible at the very beginning of the season. If it is, I'm sure for every Juventus fan it will be very exciting to see them play all together. Let's see if the rest of the team will provide enough balance for all these attacking players to play together. But I see an interesting pattern here. Like I see a very positive thing and a very negative thing. The very positive thing is that we're finally getting exciting players in attack, young players as well, because we got Ale Begovic, we got Rodrigo Mora, who we mentioned before, who is also 19. Mastantuono at Fiorentina, who is 19 as well. We got all these attacking players that we really want to see in Serie A to raise the level of the league. But at the same time, and this is something we're going to mention later on, I still don't see enough Italian players in the league. Again, I had an article yesterday. If we consider Vicario, it's 28 Italian players signed by Serie A players so far, and it's not enough. It's simply not enough. There are teams, even top-level teams, that have not signed a single Italian player. Obviously, we don't expect changes from one day to another because the Malagò spell has just begun at the end of June, but this is something that I hoped I would see something different this summer, but at least we having some courage, I would say, in investing in exciting players, because again, Ale Begovic, Mora, Mastantuono, all these types of players, will be very interesting to see. Who are the most exciting to watch, guys? Starting with Matt, especially all these new players in attack. Maybe, I mean, you can pick from all these signings as well. There is Arthur Atta, for example. I'm quite excited to see Alexander Stankovic as well, even though he plays a little deeper in midfield. I would not be surprised to see him replace Çalhanoğlu towards the end of the season. But finally, we're seeing some exciting attacking reinforcement, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to start right off the top and just start with Ramos, because I think anytime you spend, you shatter your club record fee, Milan, to bring in a player like this in such a premium position, a position that you've struggled to get production from. Naturally, that's going to stand out for me. And the question is always going to be asked: is this the guy to break the curse, right? Because aside from Giroud and that short return for Zlatan Ibrahimovic, this has been a real pain point for Milan over the years, is getting production from this position. And we've seen how really a lot of things can hinge on whether or not you have a producing forward, and how that sort of swings the pendulum in the positive direction for your season. So he is definitely one of them. I think with Fiorentina, I think I'd be remiss to ignore what they've done, because they started early and often. They were bringing in players all over the board while the World Cup was still going on. And everyone was like, all right, Fiorentina with Fabio Grosso, when you have Paratici involved, they seem ambitious. They had a very difficult last year where they kind of flirted with relegation. They were able to survive there. But I think Arthur Atta is a really good signing. I think this is a player that, if given the right opportunity, I think we can see him move on pretty quickly, which I think, look, if you're Fiorentina, I think you're kind of in that business of getting young players like this and building them up and doing some player trading. So I think Atta would definitely be in that conversation. And I also think Pellegrino is a really fascinating one, because I think with Pellegrino, he hasn't really gotten the body of work. I know he had a pretty decent season last year with Parma, but Fiorentina threw a substantial fee on the table for a player like this. And I think if he produces for them, I think this could be one of the next big signings from a striker position, leaving, of course, Italy in the coming years. So I think those are just a few that I'd probably say that stand out for me. But of course, again, you're going through the list here. There's a ton of talent that I think has come into Serie A, which is great. But as you pointed out, seeing a little bit more Italian presence would be, welcomed.
Peter, your favorite signing so far, regardless of how much they cost. And I want to ask you both guys, given that Matt mentioned Pellegrino, they invested a lot of money. They let Piccoli join Bologna, obviously, so he comes in to replace Piccoli. But we got this news of Como sending an offer for Moise Kean. So first, Peter, on your favorite players, but then we discussed the future of Moise Kean as well, because the first offer has been rejected, but I have the feeling that more will come, talking about Italian players as well.
Sure. Top signing, I'm really liking Ala Begovic to Juventus, not necessarily as one of those immediate impacts kind of players, but just because of the sheer level of interest from across Europe that was there for him. And the fact that he's decided to come to Serie A to come and play with Juventus, even though there's not Champions League football on offer, I actually think his season in the Europa League might be an ideal chance for him to come and develop. So I'm really excited by that one. Kean as well, I think you're right. I think there's probably more to come from Como, who obviously still really seriously need Italian players in their squad to make up for the Champions League sort of squad ratios about homegrown players or locally trained players. So I think there's probably more to come on that front as well, which again would be a really interesting signing for Como, and would give them that centre forward they need probably to sort of rotate and compete with Duvikas if they're going to play in two competitions. There's sort of three competitions, including in the Champions League. They're going to need another option up there. So I think Kean would be an interesting player to go for, and it sort of kills two birds with one stone. The fact that he's Italian and helps up their sort of homegrown players ratio would be interesting. I think what are the price tags we're looking at there, Lorenzo? Is it about 40 million that was slapped on Kean's head? What was the price tag?
No, he had a clause that was raised to 65 million, I think, this summer. but it's expired. It expired at the end, I think mid-July. Yeah, mid-July, the release clause expired. I mean, I don't think Fiorentina will be in the position to ask for that same money given the last season that Kean had. Maybe around 45, 50 million, it's a fee that can be acceptable for Fiorentina, even if the risk at this point, I mean, I think Fiorentina have been the most exciting team in terms of transfers this summer. There's a lot. I live in Florence. There's a lot of excitement in town because there are so many new players, so many talented players. Mastantuono, Atta. Fiorentina is always a team that whenever they get results, historically, they get those results by playing a great brand of football. They get those results with fantastic players. So there is a little bit this feeling that they're trying to recreate something similar to what happened in the past. I think you lived in Florence as well at some point, Peter, no? So you know very well what I'm talking about. But after all these exciting signings, selling your best striker, selling one of the best players to a direct opponent for the top four, I think you not ruin the whole session, but leave a bitter taste in the mouth of the fans and the club as well. So I think there's an agreement between Paratici, the Fiorentina direction, and Kean that if a good offer arrives, the lad is allowed to go. But at this stage, less than a month left before the end of the transfer window, I mean, you need to have an actual replacement ready. Pellegrino is quite good, but you would still need a striker of the same level. What would you suggest? Is also considering Italy national team, Matt, stay or go?
Moise Kean?
Yeah.
I think there's a chance he goes. I think Como are going to be aggressive here. And I think, to your point, they need the Italian presence, but they also need and have shown that they're ready to make those impactful signings that I think can push them forward. And when they're in the Champions League, I think they want to make a statement in their competition this year. So I wouldn't surprise me if they went in there and threw a pretty substantial fee on the table to Fiorentina, who have already secured who could potentially be their starting player in Pellegrino. I mean, I think the fee was 25 million, give or take, for Pellegrino. So that's not nothing, right? It's not like they got a player that's more of like a rotational guy, a guy that's more of like a deputy striker. I observe Pellegrino as a starter for Fiorentina, in my opinion. But I think, to your point, the fee has to be substantial. And I think Como are in a position where I think they'll put the money on the table and they will get him in. So I actually do think Como are going to get him in. I think it's really fascinating to see how they go about finishing the market, because I think they have real aspirations of not just being happy to be in the Champions League and happy to be a top 4 team from last year. I think they want to keep pushing forward, keep competing, and if the stars align, be a Scudetto contender this year.
Guys, final segment of this live show, final 10 minutes here. I want to talk about Italian players, which is something that I mentioned before. Now, the counting I did yesterday was 28 Italian players signed by Serie A clubs so far this summer. Costantino Favasuli at Napoli is the number 29 because he's having Napoli medical as we speak, so it's going to be announced as a new Napoli player probably later this evening or tomorrow morning, but still we don't have enough, still not enough Italian players signed by Serie A clubs. Milan, for example, they even got Diego Moreira, who technically will replace Davide Bartesaghi on the left. So we're talking about a team that, correct me if I'm wrong, probably in the ideal starting 11, it's just one Italian starter, Gabbia. I might be wrong, but I think it's just Gabbia. They also have other Italian players. They have Samuele Ricci as well, for example. But it's not obviously just a Milan problem. It's generally a typical Serie A problem, which we hope that with new policies, with new laws, will change in the future. But there are a few Italian signings and Italian deals that have been made through the summer. Personally, I have my favorite one, which I'm going to say after you guys, and which I wrote in an article on Football Italia yesterday as well. I'm trying to get the most expensive Italian deals in Serie A as well through Transfer Market as well as we speak. So it could make it easier for us to visualize which Italian players have been signed by Serie A clubs this summer, which I'm showing now. Personally, no, I will tell you later on. I want to know your thoughts first. Who are you the most exciting to watch talking about Italian players this season in Serie A?
I guess I'll start. I mean, I think initially my first player that I latch on to is Liberali. I think, he seems like one of the best case studies for what we've been talking about, right? Giving opportunity to young Italian players. This is a player that was born and bred by Milan. He got a cup of coffee with the first team a couple seasons ago. Can't really take too much from it, but then really wasn't given that opportunity to continue to flourish. Hey, he goes to Catanzaro, clearly a player that is of quality, had a really good second half for them. Once I think Cisse moved to Milan, got injured, I think Liberali was able to really flourish, and you saw him even grow into his body. He became a little bit more physically capable at this level, playing him, amongst adults and men, because this is a guy that's 18 years old, 19 years old. Now that he basically rejected a return to Milan and is at one of the most, if not the most exciting project and club in Italy, in Como, that feels like the most forward thinking, I'm really fascinated to see the type of role that sets cards out for him. Because I think amongst all the players that they have coming in, amongst all the quality, of course, Nico Paz staying there as well, this could be one of those moments where we see Liberali get the runway to be the next big Italian star. And he comes in a position where it's not a defender. It's a young, exciting, attacking midfielder with quality, skill, who has shown it at every level before coming into Milan's picture. And of course, with the Italy, the younger teams for Italian football. So that's the one that stands out for me. But of course, there are many players, Ekator, you have Favazzulli. There's plenty of players that I think, despite a very small number, a number that needs to increase, that have actually made moves this summer that I think and hope have big launching off seasons this year.
Peter?
Yeah, I'd agree. Probably looking at the names that we've just been scrolling through there, that Liberali is probably the standout or the most exciting one on that list. I don't think it's the most exciting list of Italian talents that we've ever seen over the last 20, 25 years. And that is an issue. I mean, if we're talking about why we're not seeing so many Italian players moving from one club to another, it probably comes back to that age-old argument of the young players aren't being given enough opportunities in Serie A, aren't being given the opportunity to develop and express themselves at the highest level. So that's probably the core issue that needs to be resolved. Yes, Matt, I think you're right that Liberali going to Como, as you said, one of the most exciting projects, not just in Italy, I think in and around Europe, is a really exciting move, and a move where he's going to get Champions League football, get to work under a head coach that everyone seems to rant and rave about in Cesc Fabregas. So I think that will be quite an exciting move. I don't mind the signing of Jeff Ekator for Juventus as a sort of young backup striker. I think that's not a terrible move. It's one to watch for the future. But yeah, I think there are other Italian talents within Serie A sides that could have interesting seasons. I'm just not amazed by the list of players that have transferred from one Serie A team to another this summer, if we're talking about Italians.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, guys, I think exactly the same as you. Liberali, for things that you both mentioned, he's not a wingback, he's not a defender, he's not a centre midfielder, he's actually an attacking player who we desperately need. We've been talking all summer about the need for wingers, the need for attacking midfielders, which is Liberali's case. So, like the Vio Esposito case with Inter shows that you don't really need to be an 100% starter or play most of the games as a starter to get an actual chance with the Italy national team. You just need to play, and you need to make an impact when you are on the field, and you need to just play well and show your worth. And I think the preseason has been very positive, and the influence from Cesc Fabregas, one of the most exciting coaches in Serie A, a coach that uses the typical Spanish playing style in recent years. It's something from which Liberali can really learn and hopefully bring his experience to the Italy national team as well.
Can I just say
got these
on young? So I think, you mentioned Milan, the lack of an Italian presence, and really not just a Milan problem across the board at some of these bigger clubs in Serie A. I think what makes it it's a bit of a trade-off is, yes, they haven't brought in Italian players, Milan, and you haven't seen the big moves come in for, of course, big players like that in the Serie A. But keep an eye on what Milan are doing with the integration of Italian youth, right? We just talked about Liberali, right? Not getting the opportunity and feels like the one that got away. You have Komoto, you have Camarda, to your point, who looks like he could be a backup for Ramos, right? They have Europa League, they have cup play, so he should get a really good opportunity. And then you also have Alfredo Cisse. These are all players that have played in various levels of Italian football, have had success. They just need to be given that opportunity. And I think that Milan, hopefully, are one of the clubs that is really willing to lean in to a bit of a more youth-driven project, because it looks like those three players are going to stay. And not just stay, they actually can get some pretty important minutes this year. So I think that would be important as well if other Serie A clubs can latch onto that as well.
We got a message from David, said Moise Kean, then he corrected himself, saying Moise Kean, obviously. We understand that, we all make mistakes. Kean and maybe Ricci and Como might challenge for second place. Can I understand Ricci? I mean, I still believe Ricci is going to leave Milan before the end of the summer transfer window, but probably Como are quite covered in that area of the pitch. They got Perrone, they got Acuna, who's the captain, they got Kakere, who's the second option in central midfield. So I would hope for Ricci a move maybe to another Serie A team where he could get a bit more playing time. I've been saying Juventus since we starting doing these podcasts, not for actual information that I have, but just trying to think about what Juventus need, what Milan need. There have been rumors about Fofana linked to Juventus, and I would think that maybe Ricci would be better for Juve, because they'll be looking for potentially a new deep line playmaker, and this is exactly the role that Ricci played under Spalletti with the Italian national team. So I think Ricci to Juventus would make sense more than Ricci to Como. But I agree with you, Sam, Matt, regarding the promotions and integrations that Milan might do with Comotto and Camarda, and actually probably given the tough season that Camarda has had at Lecce last season, probably having him staying at Milan and learn from Gonzalo Ramos. You can think everything you want about Ramos, but he's an international player. He spent a few seasons at PSG, so there's a lot to learn from a striker like him anyway, and wouldn't be so bad to see him stay at Milan. What do you think, Peter, about Camarda?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I was going to say, of the sort of top Italian clubs, is there an argument that Milan have the most exciting current crop of young Italian talents with Camarda, Comotto, even Bartosaghi as well, who I'm a big fan of? So yeah, I think there's certainly a role in the Milan squad for Camarda this season, certainly, as you were just hinting at there. Possibly even as the second choice centre forward, because there's going to be so many games this season with the Champions League, which wasn't there last year. They're going to need to be able to rotate a little bit, and I think having someone like Ruben Amorim in charge, who's probably a little bit braver than certain other managers that were available in Serie A to throw a young player out there or to bring them on and develop them. And I think Camarda is a really interesting, exciting option, not just for Milan, but also for Italy, in that sort of, fingers crossed, in a sort of Esposito sort of way, that you could have a really exciting breakthrough season at a top club and start to have an impact for the national team as well. And Comotto I'm really excited about as well, because the obvious factor being Luka Modric in the Milan midfield. So having him there for, even if it's just a year, to learn from Luka is going to be really, really helpful. So I'm very excited about those two. And as I said, I'm a big fan of Bartesaghi. I hope there's still plenty of opportunities for him in this Milan side, even with Moreira coming in.
We just replied to a couple of questions that we received from John. Crazy not be able to enforce some kid rule to have a minimum of 3 Italian players in the team. As we said before here, I think that for following European laws for the freedom of workers, you can't force any organization, and including football clubs, to have a minimum number of players or workers of a certain nationality. So if you want to help clubs get more Italian players, all you can do is financial incentives. A few years ago, you remember the growth decree that helped Italian clubs sign players coming from abroad. Maybe doing something like that, but only related to Italian players, probably would help. So this is not something that you can fix by law. You can't just say you need to have this type of minimum number of Italian players, because it's against the law, not just in Italy, but everywhere in Europe. We received another question before, which I showed online, which I showed live, about Josh, who also congratulated Matt for the works that he does. Ciao ragazzi, interested to hear your thoughts on Napoli. Insane injury crisis last season, but many people think that Scudetto challenges could max be the key. What do you guys think?
It's this one's challenging, right? Because we're talking about modernization and moving forward and fresh ideas and playing young Italian players and all these sorts of things, and that doesn't seem to go hand in hand with Max Allegri. I will say this though: I think that yes, Max had a very poor ending to his return in Milan. I get that for sure, missing out on Champions League, second straight year for them without the competition. But I think there were a lot of other factors at play as to why it just didn't work for Allegri in Milan. I mean, you saw the whole pursuit of their striker, and you're seeing things come out now that apparently, like Ferlani and management, they wanted to push on for Mateta. Mateta had issues with his knee. He thanked Milan now for not basically pushing forward with that move because there were a lot of issues that were still going on. It just felt like there was a lot of dysfunction and not a lot of backing for Allegri to get him over the hump, get him the guys he needed to build out that team to do more than what they did. And I think at Napoli, De Laurentiis feels like an owner that is going to back his manager. I like the pieces in place at Napoli more than I do at Milan. And I'm not saying that Max and they're going to go now in the Scudetto. I'm not saying that. But I think that there is a lot more to like about what Napoli is with Allegri than what we saw last year with Milan with Allegri.
Yeah, for me personally, the way I see it is Inter are my favourites to win the title this year. Given that the levels they showed towards the end of the season, it's just gone. I think they were clearly the strongest team in the league by the end of it. And aside from losing Dumfries to Real Madrid, I think they've got stronger across the board. So for me, they're my current favourites to go and win the title again this season. The top 4 race, I think, becomes really, really interesting because I think there's going to be quite a pile-up of teams on the Milan, Napoli. I think someone's just suggested Atalanta, Como, several others. Roma might be up there. You never know. I couldn't call who's definitely going to finish in the top 4 this season. I think that'll be really interesting.
Guys, I showed a lot of comments. We said many things about new signings, Italian players. It's been a long show, the first one after the summer break, and it's been a pleasure to share it with you. As always, I'll be back on Thursday with another part of the Serie A preview. We'll discuss coaches, we'll discuss kits as well, and more predictions for title winners, Champions League qualification, European qualification, teams that might get relegated. And on Saturday, I'll be at San Siro, Inter Monza, first game of the season in Serie A, to discuss that game, to discuss other games as well. But this is pretty much the direction we take in for the whole season, going to games, report on the games from the spot, and then just discuss what goes on with my friends, with my colleagues, and thank you everyone for following us, and we'll be back very, very soon. Matt, Peter, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure as always.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.